and thanks for joining us. You all got a feel for what I had to say about how this session went just a little bit ago on the Senate floor, but I'll go over some of the highlights again, just to reaffirm them. At the start of this session, Democrats made it very clear that our priority was to create jobs, expand opportunity for Montana working families. We hit the ground running, rolling out a series of policy packages that were meant just to do that. By lowering healthcare costs, cutting taxes for Montana working families, strengthening our public education system, and investing in broadband infrastructure. While many policy packages failed to gain the traction that needed in this session, Democrats were successful in shaping major pieces of policy this session, including marijuana implementation and the ARPA funds that are going out to communities across the state of Montana. Democrats negotiated to craft a recreational marijuana implementation bill that matched the voters' intent as closely as we could possibly get it. The bill includes key priorities such as dedicating revenue for conservation, providing for expungement, and measures to make sure that the program is implemented in a safe and responsible manner. Democrats also shaped how Montana will spend the allocation of the American Rescue Plan to fund infrastructure, broadband, education, and opportunity for working families across the state of Montana. Democrats also stood strong and helped to defeat every right-to-work bill, bills to take over the judicial branch, and several bills aimed at taking away the rights and freedoms of Montanans. And I'll turn the rest of it over to the good Representative Abbott for her remarks as well.
Thanks, Senator Cohnhauer. I don't have too much to add to what Democrats were able to accomplish, but I did want to just quickly address how disappointing I think it was for both of our caucuses to see how quickly Republicans abandoned their campaign promises around jobs and the economy and spent most of the session actually undermining the rights and freedoms of Montana kids and families. We saw unprecedented attacks on the independent, co-equal judicial branch, just pieces of legislation stacked up that would have made it partisan, that would have gerrymandered the districts, that would have really and severely undermined our court system, which is the last hope that many Montanans have to get their issues resolved. You know, our constituents sent us here to create jobs, and our constituents sent us here to be laser focused on the folks that needed a break the most, middle-class Montanans, working-class Montanans. And what we saw was a Republican tax package that just benefits wealthy Montanans disproportionately. We've said it from day one that we are laser focused on folks that need the help, and Republicans just weren't. When we look back at the budget, when we look back at the way that the tax cuts will affect Montana families, what we'll see is middle-class and working-class families getting almost nothing, and the wealthiest Montanans taking home quite a big check. Montanans have a lot to be concerned about as we're moving forward, but there are a couple things that I really want to celebrate, and one of them is something that Jill already mentioned, which is the American Rescue Plan Act package, which was delivered by Senator Tester and President Biden, and that money is going to do a lot of good in our state. That money is going to create a lot of jobs in this state, and I think you heard Representative Garner say that our fingerprints are all over that legislation. We made that legislation better, we made it more effective, and we're incredibly proud of the work that we did on that. But to close out and open it up to some questions, you know, we're incredibly proud of the job that our caucus did showing up to this building every single day to fight for our constituents, for working class families, for middle class families. And we won't stop relentlessly fighting for economic opportunity and job creation and good paying job creation, union job creation in this state. We'll fight through the interim and we'll be ready for next session stronger and with bigger numbers. Thank you. Any questions you have? Throw them out. I can sort of direct them. But if you have it for someone specific, say so. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll start by saying that we need to tell the story of who we are and what happened in this building, and we have to do it effectively. I think on the positive side, we can talk about an incredible investment in infrastructure, including broadband infrastructure, that will be a game changer for equity in the state, for job creation, for small businesses in rural Montana being able to compete. We need to tell that story. We also have to tell the story of the consequences of legislation that passed here and the impact it has on working class families and middle class families. And I think we're prepared to do that. And I'm actually very excited to do that. I think the rest of our caucus is too. I don't know, Senator Cohenhauer, if you have anything to add.
Just one little thing, and I think that in my farewell speech, as the minority leader for this session, I think I was pretty clear about the fact that Montana voters are the ones that are going to decide whether or not we did the people's business in this House. And I am actually very gratified at the number of people that engaged in the process here with us, that were on Zoom meetings from across the state of Montana. I do believe that that added a lot to the legislative session, to hear from Montanans across the state that normally wouldn't be able to come, leave their jobs and come here, but were able to get on and actually have their voice heard here. I believe that Montanans' engagement was huge and made a difference in a lot of the things that we did here. So that's one of the things that I really want to capitalize on. A lot more people knew what was happening in this building, and my hope is that when they go back home, they're held accountable by the folks that would vote for them.
My question is for either minority leader. I'm wondering if you guys could put this session into perspective. For me, this is my first session here in terms of some of the other ones that you guys have been in the past, in a couple of dimensions. One being how well you thought your guys' voices and I guess concerns, how well you made an impact in conversations this session compared to others as a caucus, and also how you thought the tone and I guess the tone of the debate was this session compared to others in the past. Yeah, sure. Sure, I'll take a crack at that one. So for the first time in almost 2 decades, Republicans had control of the governor's office, both chambers and supermajority in the House. So the context was really different. And I think, I'm proud of the way that our caucus approached that, looked for every opportunity to impact policy. And I think, we've covered some of the accomplishments that we had. In terms of the tone of the debate, I think that we struggled some in the House. I think you all saw that, and you know that. And we got to have one last squabble today on the last day, which was nice. But I do appreciate, and I said it, before we closed, that I did appreciate our leadership's relationship with Republican leadership in the work that we did to try to address some of that over the course of the session. I think the tone of the debate wasn't always great, but we were always able to correct it when something went over the line. And so I did appreciate that.
No, and the only thing to follow up on was, of course, I think in the Senate we tend to be a little bit more respectful in most cases. But I think the tone of this legislature was much different than I've ever seen it before. And I really do think it has to do with the fact that there really wasn't balance. There wasn't balance in this building that we've seen for the last several years. You might have had Republican majorities in the legislature, but we had a Democratic governor. So it actually forced folks to come to the table and actually work in this middle ground where I think most Montanans are. This session was really, when you saw the rancor and you saw all of the things that were going on, I think it was a lot about not having that balance. We didn't have the folks that needed to come to the middle to have those discussions. So I think that was really disappointing to see what happens when there isn't balance in this building and how difficult it is. I do think that we were pretty successful in making sure, as Representative Abbott said, of making sure that our fingerprints were on a lot of policy issues. And you're going to see how the fact that our policy ideas have come through and are going to help Montanans across the state, especially in rural Montana. I do believe the telehealth bill, the broadband, all of those things that we fought so hard for in our policy ideas did show up in final products that I think are going to be very, very meaningful to families across the state of Montana.
My approach is to express our frustration in the overreach of that select committee. The fact that we're spending $250,000 to essentially tell judges that we'd prefer to use personal emails. It seems like a very big waste of time and energy when we should be focused on other things like the $3 billion that we're putting into infrastructure over the next 2 biennium. So I think both Senator Sands and I, will release a minority report to the draft report that you guys saw yesterday, and we'll show up and we'll take it seriously and our role on that seriously. But we're going to challenge the fact that we think this is an overreach, it's a breach of separation of powers, and it's really an attack on an independent, co-equal branch of government that we all depend on and that Montanans really depend on. They expect checks and balances. Yeah, I'd actually like to kick that to Senator Jacobson, who's really our lead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tell you this, there was a lot of work that went into 701. And take it back to where the ballot initiative was passed. Our citizenry, there's no more pure form of deciding an issue than to take it to the people themselves. And we did, and we came back. There was a lot of work that went into 701 from the very, very beginning. And there was a lot of, we all had to give a little bit to get this done, and we all had to respect everybody. And at the end, I think both sides of the aisle, we put aside our ideologies, and we rolled up our sleeves, and we got done the best thing that we could. 640 was nothing but an attempt to undermine that. 640 was nothing more than a group of people that felt that they could hold House Bill 2 hostage, that they could exert their will over the work and the wishes of the legislature and the people of Montana. So, and it was very disappointing that we spent a lot of time working on this issue, or at least allowing this issue, the 640, to continue to fester. But in the end, I'm thankful for the Senate and the level heads and the people that respected the work and our citizenry. So this 640 was defeated just as it should, and now we can go on about making recreational marijuana in the state a success as well.
Bryce?
Sir, would you repeat that question? Unfortunately, this session, as we've seen in many years before, there has been an unbridled attack on Montanans' constitutional right to vote, something that is guaranteed for every one of us who is an eligible voter in this state. And unfortunately, now with the Republican governor, they knew that they were able to push some of these agendas that they've been pushing year after year after year, despite the fact that the people of Montana, especially in the issue of election day registration, have rejected their voter suppression attempts. So unfortunately, this is not just a Montana issue. We're seeing it in states like Georgia and states like Arkansas and states like North Dakota, where they're doing everything they can to make it harder for everyday working class people, especially in minority communities, especially in Indian country, to cast their ballot and have their voice heard. So we fought with everything we could. We fought tooth and nail to make sure that every eligible voter, no matter who you are, where you come from, or who you're voting for, had the ability to cast a ballot, and that's something that we'll always continue to do. But unfortunately, it's been very, very clear throughout the 4 months that we've been here that the Republican voter suppression agenda is going strong.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with the confirmation of Judge Abbott, I think, as we saw an attack on the judiciary on so many fronts, I think the abeyance of those appointments was certainly one more avenue to go down. I think what changed really, I think, was the humanity. I think Judge Abbott came up and spent some time with some folks and really had some frank conversations with people. And I think at the end of the day, they understood that he was the best man for the job and that he had served well and will continue to serve well for the state of Montana. That's a great question, Holly, and I think we did have a number of conversations about that. Certainly there is some guidance provided by the councils that are over that. I think the reality is the way the ARPA money came down, the guidance is still coming out from the feds. They've provided good guidance, and I think they'll continue to provide more good guidance. And so certainly we appreciate the partnership with Senator Tester and all of his folks in DC and really his work to make the ARPA funds a reality. We look forward to working hand in hand with Senator Tester to deliver for Montana.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, broadband, we came in having a couple of our members, Representative Sullivan and Representative Harvey, doing a lot of work in the interim around broadband infrastructure, and so felt really ready to go out of the gate. I think you saw that the package we put out was comprehensive. It looked at eliminating barriers, it looked at creating a plan and really funding infrastructure that was targeted at the places that needed it the most. And I really do think that, and I'm proud of both Representative Sullivan and Representative Harvey for the work that they did. When you saw at the beginning of the session, there was one tax abatement. That was the Republican proposal. If you look at what was passed as part of the ARPA funding, there's a plan, there's a manager, it's funded. We're putting big money into infrastructure. And of course, having President Biden and Senator Tester deliver that opportunity was huge, but we had the policies in place. We saw Representative Harvey's Dig Once get through, which really eliminates barriers and makes things a lot more efficient and effective. And then we saw Representative Sullivan, Representative Running Wolf's ideas incorporated into the final plan. So we feel great about it. I think Representative Sullivan will serve over the interim on that infrastructure committee and really have her hands in what gets done there. And we're really proud of that work and really thrilled that so many of our ideas ended up in the final product.
So my hope is that we will take the time. I mean, there was a lot of the study resolutions were about functional placement for kids, substance abuse, looking at programs. I think that those are going to rank pretty high for the folks, for our members. Because we think that those things are important. It's legislative oversight of the executive is what we do, and that's part of what the interim process is all about, is looking at what's going on in the departments. Are they implementing the legislation correctly? I'm also looking forward to having our budget folks continue to have their fingers on the ARPA stuff. The budget committees are going to continue through the interim, and they will be watching how money is spent in every single one of the departments that has the ARPA money in them, and how quickly are we getting that on the ground on behalf of Montanans. We need those jobs. We need families to be working. We need folks out in every community across the state of Montana taking advantage of the ability to go to work, feed their families, and take care of the state of Montana. And that's what we're looking for with the infrastructure and being able to do that every single corner across the state.
I'm not sure I heard the entire question, but it sounded like you were asking about some of what's going on, the study bills tied to DPHHS. I expect that we'll have quite a bit to say about that and a very strong role. I know, for example, I've been on the Section B committee, both policy and finance and claims, and that Section B committee will be the budget committee during the interim. So we will be keeping an eye on a lot of the expenditures and the proposals and things going forward. I'm a proponent for continuous eligibility, but I didn't win that fight. But I think that if we can be careful about how that's done, and there will be some review going forward. So there very well could be changes to that. So I think it's going to be very important, but I think we will have a lot to say. Thank you.
The only thing I'd add to that is continuous eligibility is part of our waiver with CMS, and so there will need to be a public process around an amendment to that waiver, and I think that's another opportunity for us to engage in that policy discussion, have the public engage as well. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hey, and I would like to thank all of you for hanging with us this session. I know it was difficult for you all to be face-to-face in the building, especially at the beginning. So I want to thank you guys for getting on Zoom when there was availability, being in the building when you felt safe. And so thank you so much for the work that you've done through the session. Thank you.